I actually get quite excited for the month to end because I love making these wrap-up videos. So here we are, it's the end of May and it's time for another monthly reading wrap-up. I read 5 books this month, 1 particularly chunky one and 4 smaller ones. But size does not matter on this channel as all the books will be judged equally. So join me as I tell you about the books I read in the month of May. I'm going to be telling you what each one is about, what I rated them out of 5 stars and what I liked and disliked about them. And if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Katerina, welcome, it's lovely to see you here. And okay, let's get into it. So, starting off with this very chunky gal, the first book I read in the month of May was The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. I actually took this book on holiday, so just ignore the fact it's absolutely ruined by like pool water, sun cream, and probably my own sweat. But anyway, this story is set in Kerala, India, and it spans over the years of 1900 to 1977. And it follows 3 generations of one family that suffers quite a peculiar affliction, in that in every generation there is at least one person that dies by drowning. Which isn't helpful, as where they live, they're literally surrounded by water. This novel explores themes of family, tradition, legacy, sacrifice, love, and grief, as well as tackling some very sensitive topics such as colonialism, discrimination, and addiction. And I gave this book 4.5 stars. Firstly, I absolutely just adored this book. It's one of those beautifully rich stories you just find yourself being so invested in, especially through the gorgeous writing as it had such elegant prose and descriptive detail. Initially, I thought I was going to be put off by how many years that it spanned over, because sometimes when you have loads of characters it can get quite complicated, but I found myself really caught up in the story and really attached to the main characters. I also found the portrayal of India under British rule really interesting, and the long story allows you to see how India transformed into this independent nation. Plus, the story also includes medicinal narratives and how science has allowed us to gain deeper insight into illnesses that we once weren't able to understand. And I believe the author is actually a doctor, and it's super insightful to see his expertise coming through his works of fiction. The only thing I disliked about this book is that it did feel like it dragged at times, but it's not because it's 700 pages, as there's some big books that don't feel like they drag. But I just felt like there were certain points in the story that just kind of felt a bit slow and often repetitive. But I wasn't totally mad at it because I really did enjoy the writing and the story. But I will admit, as mentioned, there was a lot of characters and I found myself losing track of the minor characters sometimes. Like, someone will be mentioned and I'll literally be like, who on earth is that? However, aside from these aspects, I really did enjoy the novel. I found this book to be one of those where it essentially tells you what the essence of life is, and it just makes you appreciate being alive and having family and friends around you, which, to be honest, I think is the point of life, and I think it's good that we're reminded of this through fiction. The second book I read this month was I Am Not Your Negro by James Baldwin. This book is essentially the manuscripts of the documentary film directed by Raoul Peck under the same name. And it's based on James Baldwin's unfinished manuscripts called Remember This House, which ended up only being 30 pages long. The book explores Baldwin's observations on American history, as well as its persistent racial problems, especially against African Americans. He also gives personal recollections on civil rights leaders Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. All 3 of them were his friends until they were all assassinated. The book uses words from this unfinished manuscript as well as his other published works, letters, and interviews. And I gave this book 3 stars. This book has some incredibly powerful messaging that Baldwin very cleverly articulates. There were really some amazing yet very heavy quotes in here that really packed a punch. There are so many I wish I could read, but one that particularly stuck with me is, "In America, I was only free in battle, never free to rest. And he who finds no way to rest cannot long survive the battle," which I think very accurately sums up the constant struggle that African Americans have to face when fighting for their civil rights in America. And it's so important to read books like this to gain an insight on other people's lives and the struggles they go through, because if we don't, we're literally ignoring the struggles that a whole segment of society faces. I also really liked the imagery in this book. It includes a lot of shocking photos that's really emotional to see today, and it makes you question how such things were permitted even just back 50, 60 years ago. Like, it's crazy that it was that recent ago. The main reason I didn't rate this book high was not for the content, but it was because of the narration and layout. This was originally a film and a book was made off the back of it, of the manuscripts. However, I read the book first because it was a birthday present and I didn't know that there was a film that was made originally, so the narration felt just very random and disjointed. And then I watched the film afterwards and it made so much more sense. Because there was a lot of accompanying videos and visual cues that gave context to the words to make you understand them and the flow better, whereas the book would feel really disjointed because it would flit between like a random letter, an interview, like a quote from a movie scene, and it was therefore hard to then follow the narration of the book and the overall flow of it. If you're planning on reading this book, I would honestly say to watch the film first, which is such a rare opinion from me, just because I feel like you got a more harder impact from the film when you had all these really shocking videos from the past that you just don't get from the book. However, I still think it's an incredible piece of media, and if you don't want to watch the film, then definitely still pick up the book. The third book I read in May was Less Than Zero by Bret, Easton, Ellis. Yes, the same author as American Psycho. This was actually his first ever book that was published when he was 21, which I actually just think is crazy. Like, imagine publishing a book at 21. But anyway, this novel follows an 18-year-old college student that's visiting his home in LA during the Christmas holidays. This story follows him as well as other rich, white, overprivileged, and morally corrupt sons and daughters of the affluent Hollywood executives during the cocaine-filled 1980s. Throughout the novel, we see our main character feeling progressively alienated in this culture, losing faith in his friends, and we also hear his meditations from past events. And I gave this book 4 stars. I feel like this author's work is controversial, but I hate to say that I do like him. Firstly, I love how this book is essentially a period piece criticizing the materialistic hedonism of the 80s and how these unloved LA rich kids go to these extreme lengths just to feel something, including taking every drug under the sun and participating in morally questionable sexual acts. And whilst they should seem exciting and thrilling, they're actually depressing, unappealing, and completely unglamorous. I was also really intrigued with the writing style of this book because it was something completely new and unique to me. The novel has this clipped prose, a very quick matter-of-fact statements that quickly describe one thing to the next of what this character is doing, and it's this disorienting haze that kind of mirrors his mental state, and it kind of shows how he's just doing one thing to the next just depending on what others do, and he's not really reflecting or considering his actions or the consequences. Everything kind of feels flat, detached, and hollow, which kind of makes you as a reader feel anxious. I saw a few people criticize this book, saying it's just a depressing and pretentious story about rich white kids who they had no sympathy for, but I think that they're missing the point that these kids in this story all hate their lives as well, and it's not their fault because they're in this position as teenagers when really it's their parents and culture to blame for, especially when you realize that the main character is sort of paralyzed in this indecision and he just accepts this doom that's coming for him. However, I do think that is the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars. Like, his passiveness in the story did really frustrate me, especially when he did see some really horrific things going on. But I also get that's probably the point of the book, that a lot of other kids felt this way, but I don't know, it didn't really sit well with me, and I can't even really articulate why I can't give it 5 stars, but it's just a feeling I have. I can't give it 5 stars. But that aside, it's a really good book, and as you can see, it's super short, so you can get through it pretty quickly. The next book I read in May was Mr. Salary by Sally Rooney. Now, this is part of a series called Faber Stories, which is a collection of short stories written by different authors, and the stories vary in genres and style. This particular story is written by the well-known author of Normal People. This short story, and I really mean short story because it's only 33 pages long, follows a university student who is in love with her guardian of sorts, and this man is 15 years older than her, and she used to live with him because when she was a teenager her parents were unable to look after her. And the story is set during a trip back home from uni where she stays with him, and I gave this book 1.5 stars. So this book is interesting because it was her first ever published piece that basically gave her a step up to then write the rest of her fiction novels, and this is probably my most controversial opinion on this channel, but I am not a fan of Sally Rooney. Please don't unsubscribe. I just find her plots quite dull and her writing style a bit one-dimensional. And trust me, I've read all of her books hoping to find a different opinion because I do really want to like her, but I just don't. The main trope she always uses is miscommunication, which I just absolutely detest with every fibre of my being. And this story as well just also fell flat to me. Like, I just felt like it had no substance and I did not care for it. Like, okay, it's about a student in love with an older man who doesn't really reciprocate it. That's it. And there was no real story in these 33 pages. It just kind of felt like the background of another story. So then I just didn't really care. The only thing stopping me giving this 0 stars is that there were a couple of good lines in there. I will give this to Sally Rooney. She occasionally does drop some hard lines in her books. I don't know, to wait 33 pages just to have 3 or 4 good lines and all of that just isn't worth it for me. I don't know. Her work just isn't for me. I don't know why. Maybe I need to read it when I'm older again and see if I change my mind. But yeah, sorry. And the very last book I read in the month of May was How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division by Elif Shafak. So this book, which the author labels as her manifesto, is really a short essay that looks into the emotional and psychological impacts of living in a world that's feeling increasingly more polarized and divided. And it's a response to the tumultuous global events that's happened in recent years, such as political upheaval, social unrest, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And it offers a contemplative look on the state of contemporary society. And I gave this book 3 stars. I liked this book as I really resonated with the overall messaging that the author was trying to convey. How in this modern age with seemingly binary politics, especially where social media acts as an echo chamber for these polarizing opinions, along with this increasing sense of unease and dissatisfaction with the state of the world, the author also blends political commentary with philosophical musings and touches upon themes of identity, belonging, and how this human spirit is meant to cope with all of this. I particularly liked her recommendations on resisting the urge to simplify these complex issues, as well as embracing identity and always making an effort to connect with people around you. I suppose the reasoning I didn't score this book any higher is because all of these revelations felt quite obvious to me, but I think that's because I engage in this sort of political discourse quite often. So I don't really want to fault this book on the knowledge of this that I already have, as such a book could be 5 stars to potentially a younger audience or someone where this material is completely new to them. But overall, it was a really nice, easy read as the book is only 50 pages, and it does include some really solid messaging on democracy and politics that I think that we should all read. Also, just a shout out for my UK audience, there is a general election being held on the 4th of July. Please make sure you are registered to vote. I'll include any links down below to help with this. This is our only opportunity that we get to have a say in how this country is ran. And on that note, those are all the books I read in the month of May. I realise now that maybe size does matter, as I rated the biggest book the best score. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like down below. It really helps my channel out. What books did you read in the month of May? Did you enjoy them? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. I make new videos every Tuesday and it'd be lovely to see you there. And then you're here for all my other monthly reading wrap-ups. Feel free to also follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post books as soon as I finish reading them, so you can see what they're about and also what I've rated them. And I will see you in the next one. If you have any video ideas that you want me to do, drop them in the comments below and I'll try and make them happen. I'll see you next time. Bye!